It's December in New York City. And you know what that means. Yep, year-end prediction lists. At Microsoft, we want to break through the clutter. This is the debut episode of Trends Studio. Welcome to Trends Studio, presented by Microsoft. I'm Jeffrey Colon, head of brand studio at Microsoft Advertising, joined by my brothers from another corporate mother, Peter Weinberg and John Lombardo of LinkedIn. How are you both doing today?
Doing great. How are you?
Oh, awesome. Glad
mediocre at best, I
Mediocre.
would say. Yeah, that's how I'm doing.
Yeah.
Well, glad to have you here.
So happy to be here.
Radical transparency, trend number one.
Yeah,
There you
trend number
go.
one.
There you go. Radical candor.
Yeah.
Now, we're coming out of a year, 2018. A lot of exciting stuff. What have you identified as trends that, were sort of bubbling or are brewing this past year that marketers and advertisers, should recall?
I think 2018 was really the year of the marketing counter-revolution. We've been given all this terrible advice for the past 10 years, brand purpose, real-time marketing, personalization, TV is dead, and you finally have some very smart people rising up and saying none of that is true. None of the econometric data supports any of that. People like Mark Ritson, people like Les Binet and Peter Field, who are just sort of leading the movement against some of these bad ideas, and I think marketers are starting to listen to them.
John, what have you seen out there or reflected from 2018 that was interesting?
Yeah, I mean, we are, our whole thing is about contrarian ideas. So obviously we gravitate towards these sorts of takes. But I think that's right. I think marketing has lost its way, has lost its influence, certainly in the C-suite. CMOs have shorter and shorter tenures. They're not respected either in budgetary or board terms in the way that they used to be. And so marketing is losing its influence, it's losing its budget. And I think a lot of it is because we have traded what I'd call, sort of well understood traditional fundamentals for digibabble, right? We will believe anybody who has something to say, evidence or not. And so Peter and I tend to be more on the side of, the people that I would call the Protestants, for lack of a better way to put it. The Byron Sharps, the Mark Ritsons, the Benets and Fields. Although I believe it's Binet, not Binet.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, how embarrassing. Don't tell him I said that.
I won't. He won't see
great.
this.
Yeah, he's not going to see this.
We're getting toward the end of a decade, so 2019 is almost upon us. Do you think the pendulum is finally swinging back to where, for much of 2010s, it was really around performance marketing and ROI? You almost had to justify your existence as a marketer. Yep. You almost still do. Do you feel like that is, that pendulum is possibly swinging where people are saying, let's get creative again. Let's figure out long-term brand strategy. Maybe these digital channels are not adding up to all the value that we think they are. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, we have an idea called the war on brand. It effectively just looks at some of the data. I mean, marketers, it's funny, they claim to be very data-driven, and finance people claim to be very data-driven, but often when you present them the data, you find they're not data-driven at all because they make decisions that are obviously contrary to the data, right? So war on brand effectively means, if you look at marketing budgets over the last 10 years or so, what you'll find is that you used to spend about 50% of your budget on brand building and 50% of your budget on lead generation or sales activation in the CPG world. Now it's about 72%, 73% lead generation and 27, 28% brand building. And so all the money in particular in digital is going towards lead generation because it's easy to measure, it's real time, it in theory gives you the illusion of ROI. So the money's moving there. We call it a war on brand because really what's happening is most big companies are making themselves into small companies because they are pursuing short-term strategies that are more around efficiency. Like, can I spend this dollar and immediately get ROI? But if you think about it, most of the biggest brands in the world, they were built in a time that was pre-digital. Bob Hoffman calls it the refrigerator test. Go in and look in your refrigerator. And what are the brands in there? And were they built in a world of traditional media or digital media? Not saying that digital media doesn't play a role, but the demise of traditional media is overstated. The rise of digital marketing is probably overstated. There's more balance required, certainly on the brand side, and even in traditional and digital side. So that's generally, the recommendations we make are just go look at the fundamentals, look at how brands were built, figure out how to do that in the new world. A lot of that would be, for example, saying, wow, TV's still the most effective way to build a brand. Well, what's the corollary in digital? It would be video, right? And obviously video can be expensive, but it also has signaling effects that are valuable and is more focused it's not focused on lead gen, it's focused on just building a brand. So that's just a way to translate old ideas that we know work into a new context. And that balance, just we don't see enough of it.
So war on brand, a trend that you definitely identify for 2019 that marketers and advertisers should pay attention to. Peter, what is your trend for 2019 you think advertisers should pay attention to?
Yes, we call our trend the rise of the B2B blockbuster. So simply put, mental models are very important. And marketers have been told they need to be always on with high quality original content. And they've asked themselves a very reasonable question, which is who's very good at doing that? And the model they've settled on is this newspaper model. So what people like the New York Times do, they've set up these brand newsrooms. And if you really think about it, the newsroom model is based on three ideas. It's based on small bets. So they're not producing one huge piece of content, they're producing a million little pieces of content. It's based on real-time marketing, so you're talking about whatever is relevant in that particular moment. And it's based on personalization, so you should serve ever smaller niches with ever more niche content. But there's actually an entirely different way to make content, to monetize content, which is the Hollywood model. And the Hollywood model is essentially the polar opposite of all of those things. It's not about small bets, it's about enormous bets. And that's what Hollywood has learned, that if people are only going to see 4 movies a year, in order to break through, you need to spend an ungodly amount of money on production and marketing. So it's about big bets versus small bets. It's also about all-time versus real-time. So what is Disney doing now? They're going back and making live-action movies of all of their old movies. In the past 13 years, the top-performing movies are all either remakes of books or remakes of old movies, right? So it's about old stories, not new stories. And then I would also say the Hollywood stuff is essentially impersonalized. It's relevant to everyone. It trades on cultural myths that work in China and the US, things that work for old people and young people. It's designed for kind of mass reach.
Interesting. So blockbuster marketing, a trend to watch. I think the one that I want to add for marketers and advertisers is post-demographic world. We've been sort of stuck in this era of let's go after audiences based on really minimal targeting. What's their gender? What's their age? Where do they live? And how much money do they make? And that doesn't really show what the true capability of humanity is. It almost sort of just segments you in very simplistic terms. It also allows brands to just say, let's adopt inclusive marketing messages where we include people of color or women in our ads, but then they don't really design good products that reach those marginalized groups. So I think what you're going to have this upcoming year is companies actually saying, let's design our products to reach those marginalized groups. Let's actually make adaptive technology that reaches differently abled people so they can use that technology.
Yep. Yeah, I think we are hugely supportive of that trend, and we're not just saying that because your company owns our company. We agree with you, Jeff. I think that what's happened is marketers, again, have bought into this idea of personalization, that you need to understand who people are, their race, their gender, their household income, and deliver messaging relevant to those specific facets. There's really 3 big problems with personalization. Number 1 problem is just ethics, right? In order to deliver individualized marketing, marketers need to have data that allows them to understand people on an individual level, which is essentially like some sort of totalitarian surveillance state, right? Marketers have forgotten that Minority Report was supposed to be a dystopia. It's not supposed to be a utopia.
I mean, the irony of targeting, and targeting in particular in very specific programmatic context, is that it claims to work because of its personalization, its targeting, its precision. And in fact, we would think the data actually doesn't work. It's fake data, right? We call it big bag data or the subprime data crisis. And so to the extent that programmatic ever works, it's because there's no targeting, because the data underlying it is actually useless. I mean, there's a wonderful line about big data being, what you call it when it was too cheap to throw away, right? So rather than throw it away because there was no point to doing that, you just remarketed it as big data and then you sold it to people.
Well, awesome. I love seeing both of you. Thanks again for dropping by our Microsoft offices here in Times Square.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Great to see you.
Thanks.
I'm joined here with Taylor Lorenz, tech and internet culture reporter at The Atlantic. So happy to have you here with us.
Thanks for having me.
So looking back on 2018, what are some of the trends you've seen and you've written about for your interesting pieces you do for The Atlantic that marketers and advertisers might want to go back and read?
Well, I write a lot about meme culture. And about a year ago almost, I wrote a story on niche memes, which are these really sort of like confessional style meme accounts that a lot of teenagers use. They're almost like little personal diaries. And they've kind of evolved over the past year, but that format is still really interesting and really popular. I think people are using, especially places like Instagram, to kind of be more confessional about themselves. So that's one trend. I would say there's just a big trend towards Instagram in general. It seems to be like the perfect modern social network where every single young person has multiple accounts. They're heavily engaged in it. We were talking a little bit before we got on camera about Snapchat, which if you asked me in 2017, I probably would have said it's still relevant. And now it's just sort of faded off the map. I mean, people still use it, but their user base has dropped and it just kind of doesn't seem like they're doing that much interesting stuff.
Talk a little bit about Tumblr and what's been happening recently there. It was pretty powerful for many years. Now it seems to have a lot more rules with the community.
Yeah, so Tumblr has kind of, it really did peak several years ago, and it was always kind of a weird space. But so many memes are birthed on Tumblr, and so much like stuff bubbles up from Tumblr onto Reddit, onto Instagram, onto these bigger platforms, and ends up becoming part of the broader cultural conversation. And so as Tumblr sort of like tries to restrict its community, it'll be interesting to see where a lot of subcultures that were really active on there go. A lot of these subcultures are the ones that kind of start off trends, start off weird things. And so yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they migrate. I predict that they will end up migrating to places like Discord, where there are these more like closed communities and where it's self-policed and it's not necessarily like they're abiding by some big social network's terms of service. Also, there seems to be a lot more native Instagram memes. It's funny, like memes have, always come from like all different parts of the internet, but so much of meme culture is defined by Instagram now that it's, I think it's like kind of, it's insane to see so much stuff birthed there. Stuff used to get more birthed on Tumblr, or people just making images on Reddit. Also, I think one other trend that I've noticed a lot is people, I think that there was this peak where, we had like Alex from Target and all these kind of like micro celebrity people, like becoming really big and getting a big brand deal and like making $1 million, and I think that like people are realizing that those type of people are going to come up every minute and they don't necessarily need to capitalize on them. Like, I feel like their window of fame is getting smaller and smaller.
Fascinating. Well, we're looking forward to reading more of your pieces in 2019. I'm so glad that you were able to swing by and talk to us about some of these trends from this past year and that are coming up next year. Taylor Lorenz, tech and internet culture reporter for The Atlantic. Thanks for joining us here.
Thanks for having me.
So we've been talking to a lot of human thought leaders this year, but what about machines? Well, let's introduce you to the Harman Kardon Invoke speaker, powered with Cortana. And of course, this is a big area because while AI has become popular in 2018 as a trend, so has IA, or the intelligent assistant. And marketers and a variety of people have been using these intelligent assistants to ask and answer a lot of questions. Like, hey Cortana, ask Bing Ads to tell me about AI.
How may AI help you? That's a deep topic for me to answer here. Why don't you go to bingads.com/intelligent search for the latest white paper on this topic?
Now, of course, there's a variety of other things that people are using smart speakers for, to listen to music, to listen to podcasts, to find out local news and weather information. And of course, a big trend for us to watch in 2019 is the convergence of smart speakers with screens. Sort of reminds you of the PC. Yep, we're coming full circle again, folks. We saved our best interview for last. My esteemed colleague and partner, Felicia Gardner, agency lead at Microsoft Advertising. Now, you know the pulse of agencies. What are things that agencies should have on their radar as we head into 2019?
Oof, agency world, right? Love it. I've spent time on the agency side and full circle now to be an agency lead. Like, this is exactly what I love. I love the fact that agencies do have a pulse on what's happening. And we've seen a theme across what's going on in the industry. And first and foremost, it's top of mind for everyone, data. Data is something that agencies continue to talk about from a privacy perspective. Secondly, digital transformation. I mean, it's not a buzzword anymore. We can't just have it for the sake of saying it. So we're really in the front seats with our agencies right now, having those types of conversations and brainstorming and mapping out and having actual things that we're doing to transform their business and giving them something else to speak about in the marketplace as well. That's what they want. That's what they're challenging their partners on. And that's what we're going to continue to see as a trend in the future. For a fact, this is now the new phase of how the business will be ran. Like, how are we collaborating and figuring out how to transform what we've always done from a digital perspective? Third is diversity and inclusion. So, this is the agency or the industry, rather. I think this is the year we've really done a better job of taking notice. There's still a lot of work to do, tons of work, but we've had some disappointing experiences with advertisers and things come out, right, in the news and in media that's really made people have to step up and be aware of what we're doing and take accountability for that. And there's some personal things for me this year that really stood out. When you look at Cannes Lions this year and just kind of the events that took place there and the awards, some awards that were given and work that was being recognized, it speaks to the fact that diversity and inclusion and who's producing work in terms of who's behind the scenes within agencies, as well as the work that is being put out there, it has to be diverse. We have to think about and act on diversity and inclusion, not an option.
Love your insights on these points when it comes to agencies. Felicia Gardner, agency lead at Microsoft Advertising. Thanks for joining me here on Trend Studio.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That's going to do it for our debut episode of Trend Studio, presented by Microsoft Advertising. Special thanks to our guests, Pete Weinberg and John Lombardo of LinkedIn, Taylor Lorenz of The Atlantic, and my colleague Felicia Gardner. And of course, special thanks to Cortana. If you haven't, check out episodes of Future Boutique at youtube.com/bingads and read more at bingads.com/intelligent search.